Welcome to Analytics Nexus 2019, the premier virtual event for analytics best practice. This presentation is titled Creating Intuitive Dashboard Reporting in Power BI and will be presented by David Gatdula. This is just one webinar and a whole series of presentations you have access to beginning today. A few quick housekeeping items before I introduce this particular presentation. At any time, you can interact with this presenter or other presenters with questions and/or comments on Slack. The Slack address for Analytics Nexus is analyticsnexus.slack.com, and you should have received an email invitation to join if you registered in advance. If you didn't receive that email, you can find an invitation link to the Slack in the menu below, as well as in the resource list. Once logging into Analytics Nexus Slack, you can find the channel for David Gatdula to engage. Also, you can engage with us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @analytics_nexus. Finally, for questions on Analytics Nexus or Claravine, which is producing this event, feel free to email us at info@claravine.com. This presentation will be presented by David Gatdula. Dave is currently Manager of Marketing Analytics for Beyondsoft Consulting Incorporated, currently on assignment to a major auto manufacturer. Having digital marketing and analytical experience from small-scale business to enterprise-level Fortune 10 companies, Dave has provided extensive support through analytical insight and optimization for many different industries during his 7+ years in the digital analytics space. Mentoring his analysts and sharing his knowledge of the industry and tools with peers and eager ears is a passion always being pursued. Adobe, Microsoft, and Digital Analytics Association certified, Dave is constantly learning and improving his craft. You can find him or contact him on LinkedIn or on his website or on Twitter at DataVizDave. David, over to you.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Welcome everybody to Analytics Nexus 2019. Looking forward to going over some really cool stuff with you in Power BI. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to Claravine for putting this on. Great chance for all of us to get some good content today and learn some new things. Potentially, hopefully one of them is learning about creating some more intuitive navigation and dashboarding in Power BI. About me is self-proclaimed data nerd. I love mentoring my team members and basically just getting into the weeds and doing all kinds of fun things with the data. And getting into the weeds is what we're about to do. So here's a short agenda of what we'll be going over today. We'll introduce kind of what I've been doing for a little while, pre-warning you guys about some bad puns and potentially some Star Wars references. Getting to know our audience and assess the need, within that the scope and what we need to remember when we're kind of structuring this and thinking about it from the beginning point. I'm taking a foundational approach to this to kind of be able to kind of see the whole 360-degree ecosphere of what you really need to take into consideration when you're building, a dashboard or a presentation like this that goes out to potentially many clients or a specific client or a specific stakeholder or someone in your company, and some of the important points about the items that we'll be going over today are going to be kind of useful for a lot of other things. So we'll get into the nitty-gritty a little bit later on, but some of the takeaways I want you to be able to get from this, potentially, are sort of how to scope more effectively when you're trying to build these out at the beginning instead of just saying, hey, I'll build that for you. Kind of taking into account what you'll be building it for and planning for things that you might not see coming. And also, kind of the key point of this is designing it with behavioral intent. You want to make sure that the user can see these navigation items and see the reports that you're trying to show them and the analytics you're trying to show them with a high degree of intuitive nature. It'll also, give you a chance to shine potentially with how you can come up with something better than I've done. I'm going to go through some simple examples of how to use some of the things in Power BI, and to understand how transformative consistency can be, because it's a lot bigger of an issue coming from an agency scope than it is a lot of times coming from an enterprise scope, but they can be there either way nonetheless. And as you can see, Luke here is about to jump into one of those creepy rabbit holes, and you want to keep away from those as much as possible. They are nasty, and they can just suck your time away. A little bit about me. I've spent a little over 7 years in analytics and digital marketing. My current role is for Beyondsoft Consulting. I am the manager of marketing analytics for a major automotive firm. I have a team of analysts, and I am the product manager of the Adobe Analytics tools there, and we're doing some really great things. I'm also one of the Dallas chapter leaders for the Digital Analytics Association, one of our key sponsors here. Volunteer for the Women in Analytics mentorship program, and Adobe Analytics is where I really love to dig in, so I'm very evangelistic about that. I've had all kinds of experience with many different business types, from telecom to motorsports, hospitality industry, currently in automotive, e-commerce, and on the side there's all kinds of other small business and little projects I work on along the way. Along my time, I had the ability to pull up a lot of my experience from really early, so from top to bottom. One of my first roles was to be able to put on so many different hats, and it gave me kind of a very broad view of the e-commerce and digital space, and allowed me to learn a lot of different things. And along those paths, so many dashboards. I don't know how many there are, but one of my favorite quotes is from Hans Rosling. He was on a TED Talk, or a couple, a few years back, but it kind of goes to data visualization and how you bring the value for data visualization out to your stakeholders and your clients. He says, few people will appreciate the music if I just show them the notes, and most of us need to listen to the music to understand how beautiful it is, but often that's not how we present statistics or reporting in our case. We just show the notes. We don't play them the music. And, I can show you some music here. Probably doesn't make a lot of sense to all of you until I give it some context, but even if I do give it some context, it's not going to mean a lot, right? So I can give you this, and it could be, maybe, you might be able to get that, but still it's just another data point until you get to the place where you can actually play the music. And now you kind of get it, right? It's a good story. So we'll talk about our audience. Like I said, we're setting up the foundation for what we're going to be building on here. Know your audience well. Do they like data? Do they not? Are they executives? C-level? What do they expect to see in terms of metrics, KPIs, styling, and things like that really do matter when it comes to enterprise-level companies. There's usually style guides and things like that. Is there a preference on how they like to see data? One of my previous supervisors had a very particular way he liked to see metrics visualized and in order specifically. There are all kinds of different things that you can take into consideration and plan for, because that could be one of their pain points. And you got to find those. What works for you now, what worked in the past, what they're currently looking at, and how you could potentially optimize that. It's all part of the planning and the scope of what you're doing. So if you don't understand the audience and what they do like and don't like, and if you're just presenting another report that doesn't follow the standard or follow some sort of intuitive mindset, you're going to come against a little bit of a wall there. And one of my really good things to have that I like to ask when I'm scoping larger reports is to find out, if they have a wish list, some of the pain points that they don't like seeing, some of the good things that's worked for them in the past, what they wish they didn't see and what they wish they did see, because that can give you a really good clue into how you can make yours better or make the current setup better anyways. And always execute with CPI, something I learned a long time ago in my earlier days, but constant process improvement is something that is really big for myself and my team members. Incorporating new elements in existing reporting or in dashboarding is really helpful. Understanding how those things can be better once you left them. And need is really a powerful thing too, because everybody needs a dashboard. Somebody says that, I'm sure they do. But what's the actual need? Who needs it? What do they actually need to see in the dashboard? Are you just designing something for a deliverable, or are you actually designing something that they're going to be monitoring closely every single day, or is it something that's a high-level call-out, or something diagnostic that they want to use to drill into something? So slicers and filters and things like that can help make your presentation, flashier and great, but is it really going to help, or will it complicate whoever the audience is? So understand what metrics they need, understand how they want to see the data, gets you to a point where you can plan for the architecture and plan for the data that you're going to be pulling into the report in Power BI, because that's a critical element of how long you're actually going to spend doing this. And you got to plan for the rebel scum. You have to plan for obstacles. There's always going to be something that pops up in more complicated dashboards. It's not just more of an ad hoc analysis or something. You always have to plan for something to happen. So if you have hours you're planning to devote to a specific project or a bigger dashboard or something like that, plan a little bit of padding in there, because there's going to be something that's going to pop up, whether it's a limitation or it's an obstacle in the data or some scrubbing that you have to do. There's always something that's going to blow up your Death Star there, and planning for that would keep you from having to rebuild that thing. Like I said before, scope creep is always an enemy when you're digging into the weeds. It's something that will keep coming up more and more, especially if you're in the assessing the needs scope, the need process, and you're trying to find what kind of data you can use to answer the ask. One of the ways that I kind of get past is bypassing it with requirements, and get a clear outline of what they actually want to see instead of what they need to see or what they're wishing they can see, and get approval. Like, do a mock-up, have that sent through, and say, that's exactly what we want to see. Great, perfect. But really, it's about assessing the need early and getting an expectation set for that. You also want to take the time to understand, like I said before, the data needed and the functions you'll need to use to build your dashboard in Power BI. There's a lot of complicated functions in Power BI when you're switching from page to page, and especially with this intuitive dashboarding that I'm about to show you. Filtering and page level filters and report level filters with bookmarking is going to be a really important thing to understand well. Also understanding well the limitations of your tool stack and the MarTech that you're using. So it can really mean the difference between one data pull or literally hundreds. Very recently, I underestimated the limitations of the tools that I had, and it turned from a bi-dimensionality report into 4 different dimensions, and my tool stack couldn't handle that, so it turned into a lot of manual data pulls and automation that took a long time. That was one of the blockers I came up against. But that's one of the ones that I came against that I didn't actually foresee coming. And like I said, plan for that wall like it's inevitable. You're gonna hit someone along the way, like a visual or a bad level of effort estimate that you've given, or even poor process that you've put in place before that you're just now getting to get past. So plan like there's going to be some sort of impediment in your project. Like, this guy obviously did not plan for that. On the models and mockups, like I said before, get a requirement and get the mockup and have them sign off on it, because that can mean a huge lift of effort off your shoulders on scoping this, and it can be super simple. It can be just as easily as like a wireframe, or you just mess around in PowerPoint or Excel and give them something that that you're planning on building in Power BI, but build the data model ahead of time, right? Like understand from the needs and the requirements you've been given, understand your dimensions, understand your metrics, understand how the data that you'll be building into your model will work and relationships in between them. But keep the mockups simple. It's really just to ensure that you're meeting the need and iterate on it if necessary. Don't do any fancy formatting. Just make it functional in the scope of getting what you want to your consumer. Doesn't work all the time. You're going to have to iterate, like I said, but 60% of the time it works every time. The purpose of all this was just to lay the groundwork for a successful project. Not every dashboard is going to need all of this stuff, but keeping in mind all these things anytime that you build any sort of deliverable outside of Power BI and outside of this, it's a really good set of knowledge to have to essentially build a successful workflow for you and give you that sort of high-level view of how you adjust and how you approach different projects and different dashboards, analyses, workflows, whatever you're talking about. Because knowing what the need is and understanding it from a high level gives you a better understanding of what you can do to make things better from the ground up. So all those key elements are there, no matter the scope or project. Understand the need, getting your hands around the audience and seeing what they want. All those things really exist within a lot of the workflows that we do in analytics. My advice to you is just learn as much from others as you do from your own mistakes, because if you understand other people's mistakes too, those are mistakes that you don't have to make in your functions and in your processes. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Nacho Libre just happens to be one of my son's favorite shows for some reason. It's amazing to me too, but good quote to have to bring us into navigation, right? So constructing intuitively is kind of a broad subject. I come at it from a perspective of what's worked for me. Like I said, it could work differently for you. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but I'm just going to show you like a simple way. It's going to give you an idea of what you can do. There's all kinds of icons and pictures and overlays. You can mess with transparency, all those different things if you'd like to. But one thing that is going to maintain throughout this exercise is the fact that your header navigation and your title, whether the title changes or not, is going to carry through your report. The things that I'm going to show you are going to make it to where that intuitive navigation maintains its sort of stability through your entire report. So it gives the audience a better view of what you're trying to show them, rather than them, just kind of switching slides or scrolling down a dashboard and everything's changing and they're just trying to make sense of it. Sometimes you have an audience that just does not deal with that very well. So let's talk about the title page and the header. We're going to actually go through some of this live. I have some of it built already, but we can actually figure this stuff out together. So I've opened up Power BI Desktop. This is just a blank report, and the first two things I like to do is to insert a text box for the title and format it as such, and I can show you how to do that. We don't want any backgrounds unless you really want to. You can update the styling as much as you want to, change colors as much as you want to, but a couple of the main things that I like to maintain consistency with are the font families. So if I'm going to be using a font family, I want to make sure I'm either using Arial and sticking with just Arial, or what I typically like to do is I like to use the default font, but just in a light format. And I center it, and I utilize some of the features in Power BI. Here in the format page, you can actually align it to the center, and that gives you like a perfect centered box to work in. And we can call this, I don't know, our first slide. Mess around with some sizing. Like I said, the formatting is all up to you. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is how you want to lay this out, so we can maintain, like I said, our consistency through the process. And one of the things that I also like to do is insert a line. So at first it doesn't look really appropriate, but if we come over here to our formatting tools and look at, well, formatting tools for this rather, and we look at our line, we can change the color. I'm going to make this sort of semi-gray. I'm also going to lower the weight on it, so it's just a gray line. And I'm going to rotate it to 90 degrees, so it's just a straight line that I can put underneath my title. And that separates our title essentially from everything else that we're doing. And this is, like I said, going to maintain through to everything that we're planning on building. And you can line it up, you can center it. That's nice. And then we can start building our navigation. So there's a lot of different ways we can build our navigation. One of those ways is with their built-in buttons. You can use anything they have here, but I typically go with a blank button at first because it gives you the most flexibility and giving you the options to do a lot of different things. So in the text, pretend like this is our revenue button, right? So our font color, again, like all the formatting can be completely up to you. Your text size, your font family, again, like I said, I like to go with the same font family to make sure that we're bringing that in here. But the button text is going to help us in the future, and you'll see why. If you open up icon here, you'll see the default state, and there's default state, hover, and on press. And if you actually change those default states in the icon, the fill, and things like that, it's for every single one of them, you can actually change the colors in which are being shown on hover and are being shown on click. So on the outline, so say instead of the gray outline here, I want to have a green outline on the default state. And on hover, I can change that to purple. And we can have transparency, we can have a different outline weight if you'd like to. One of the things I like to do is just round the edges, so I'll start rounding the edges until they go through. See how it's only on hover and not on default? Pretty cool. So if I go back to default, I'm going to round those edges more. However you want to do it, like I said, this is just a preference of mine. But also on press, I want to make it the same color as the hover, or I can make it a different color. Also, you can fill it. The default state, let's pretend like I want to have it as just a lighter color of this. So I can make the transparency a little bit lighter. On hover, I want to make it just a little bit lighter as well, so that way when you hover over it, it changes along with the color. And on press, we fill it with something darker. Like I said, completely up to you. So when you press on it, something else happens. That's the first real steps to building this one. I can talk about a couple more once we get back to our slide deck here. So some of the other ones that I like to do depends on, like I said, depends on the audience. But you know, this kind of is a view of what it looks like when you're finished with that. You can say, you know, here's the title, separator, and here's your navigation buttons. You can stretch them out, you can make them different shapes, you can change the colors, all that fun stuff. With other ones, you can create from icons. You know, you can use PowerPoint or Photoshop or however you want to do it. You can create your own buttons. So you can go to buttons or image even and insert an image here, and you can make that image actually do what we're going to do with these ones as well. So you can just create the outline, create the on hover, do all those fun things. You can even make a side navigation too. You just have to have overlaid images of your navigation. So when you click on one, it's going to be the image of this showing. If you click on the other one, it takes you to the next report, essentially, that the image there on that page is going to be here, like the green is going to be on traffic. And I can show you what that's about. But basically the choices are completely up to you. There's a lot of different ways you can make this work. You don't have to have round buttons or square buttons or images or side nav or top nav. It's basically just to create the static framework for what you're going to need. And framing out your report is the first step in that. So, like I said, take account of the views, the navigation you're going to need, and what we need to do is outline the reporting space, because that's going to give us sort of the more consistent view of what we want to see. And here's an example of how I did that. So the three things I always do with these is I incorporate a date, whether or not you want the slider, just as personal preference or company preference. I have the reporting space outlined, so there's always the data doesn't come outside of that. There's you can put caveats and stuff outside of that, or your company logo, or whatever you want, and then a helper icon. And that'll take them to like an FAQ, or you can use a help button actually in the navigation, and we can walk through that as well. And in just a second, I'll show you, like I said, one of my pre-built. So this is the first step after we built our dashboards. We have our line here, we have our title that we're going to carry through. It's not going to be the same title all the way through, but as you can see, like I made these on hover, on click, they change colors, and it's easy. So what we really need to do is, to get to the point where we can have the navigation, you have to duplicate what you're building. So say, for instance, you have your reporting space here, like I said before, and this is what you've built. Pretend these other ones don't exist. You've built your navigation here, and this is how you want to see the report, and you can pretend that when they click on one of these, they're going to go to the different report you're talking about. So you have to create a new tab for each one of these different reports. So we had the title page, which has whatever you want to put on your title page. It doesn't have to be all of these, but it can be any number of these, or any way you'd like to see it. The best way to do that is to create a duplicate of that page by right-clicking and saying duplicate, and it'll give you a new tab, which is a duplicate of the first one, and you can put in your reporting space there. You can put in your dates, insert your date visualization there. This is actually one of the buttons from here, so it's a help button, and your reporting space. And once you've done that, and you're satisfied with how your navigation looks and how it's going to feel, you just duplicate it a bunch more times. As many times as you have views in your navigation, you create tabs for each one of those. So you just right-click and duplicate, and then rename it to the name that you're looking for. And see, they all have the same view. So that way, when they look at for traffic, for instance, they're going to see reporting on traffic. Nothing's going to change the navigation of the reporting space. If they click on revenue, they're going to see revenue, and nothing's going to change the navigation or the reporting space. It's all going to maintain consistency. And they can always click in between them and go through one by one. So the reason that we use buttons here or images to create our navigation is to ensure that we have really simple things for them to build out into the navigation, to keep your consumers happy and not have to worry about all the random stuff that goes on with dashboard reporting nowadays. One of the main things to simplify this report in Power BI, one of the things that I do all the time, is I hide the tabs that are anything but the title. And by doing that, just right-click on the tabs you want to hide, and you'll see the little eyeball icon come up down there. You can just hide every single one of these pages. You can still see them when you're building it, but what's going to happen is when you publish it to Power BI, the only tab they're going to see in the report is going to be this title. Title remain, so you can call it the report name if you want to. So this would be the awesome report, or whatever it is you want to name it. That way, that's a lot more simplicity, and it doesn't look like it's an Excel document, and they don't know they're actually traveling from page to page every time they click on these things. That's one of the key things for after you publish it. But here's where it gets a little more in-depth. What we want to do is we want to come up here to the view, And we want to get to the point where we can start building out that navigation, build out those click paths between these different points of interest. So to do that, we need the bookmarks pane and potentially the selection pane, but you may not. You may not need that unless you have lots of overlaid images or things like that that you need to do. So the bookmark tool or bookmark view or bookmark properties here, this essentially allows for that transfer of data and transfer of navigation between these different tabs. So the way it works is you come to a specific page or a specific tab in your report, and you want to add it as a bookmark. And the bookmark is essentially a view of your data filtered the way you want it, captured the way you want to see it. So this is going to be the main page. I'm just going to add it, and it just comes up as bookmark 1. We can rename that guy to title. Oh, I guess that's right. And we have it there. So the next thing we do is come over, let's do our traffic one. So this is going to be the traffic one. And because we're going to be landing on the traffic page, when we come through and we click on that button from the first page, this icon needs to change. So we notice that when we select it, it changes to our colors that we've predefined here. So instead of being a default state of that green, and I apologize, the outline and fill here, instead of being that default state outline of green on hover and gray on default, we want to mirror what we're seeing on press. And that's going to be this purple that I used. I guess it's a custom color here. But we want to make that the same way. So we want to fill it with the same thing that we want to see on press. And it looks like we have some colors here. We'll change this guy to the lighter color. And we'll do the same thing for the hover. That way it doesn't get confusing for them. So that way when they're on the page, nothing happens to this button. When they click it, nothing happens anyways. If they click back or to a different page, what's going to happen is it's going to take them there. But the main point of this is to say, okay, we're on the traffic page, but we don't have a bookmark yet. So if we add it now, and we'll rename this traffic. Good point here is to keep your tab titles the same as your bookmarks so you know where they're going. The main point of this is to understand that they're on the traffic page. So if they're on the title page, there's nothing selected. If they click on the traffic, we want them to go to the traffic page, and this will be selected. You can highlight it or format it however you want to. This is just an example. Here is where we can add those actions of navigation. So if we come back to the title page and we click on traffic, this button itself actually has an action that we want to turn on. And here's where the bookmarks come into play. So the type of action we want is to use that bookmark. And what bookmark do we want to go to? We want it to go to the traffic bookmark. You can add a tooltip if you want. If you'd like to, you can always change it back if you want to see that. Just start over again. But basically that's the action that we want to take. So when they click on this, in Power BI Desktop, if you press Control, they click through traffic, bingo, look at that. We have navigation to the traffic page. Let's do the same thing with revenue. Let's go ahead and change this guy back. So we'll be on revenue. We don't have to change anything back here, but we want to change this one same exact way we did it before. So the default state's going to be that color. On hover, it's going to be that color. On press, it's going to be that color. The outline, the outline of this one's going to be that same dark purple that we use, just like I said, to maintain consistency. The outline is going to maintain consistency, and on press it's going to be the same. So that way they know they're on the revenue page. Same thing as if they're on the traffic page, right? So this is how that intuitive nature of the dashboard is going to come into play. Each tab is going to have its own action for each button. So when they click on it, they're going to go to that. So say for instance here, we've only put an action on this guy. There's no action yet on this guy. Turn the action on. We want to send them as a bookmark to the revenue page, but we don't have it here. So bookmark it. Now you've added your text formatting here and your icon formatting. We can add that as a bookmark, and we'll rename it to revenue. So let's go back to our traffic page, click on our icon here to get that action, and we see revenue. So now, when they click on that, it follows through to revenue. Notice that this one doesn't have an action, so you can't go back. Like I said, you have to go through each one of these on each one of these pages and copy the actions that you want to see for each one of them. So we'll add this bookmark of the traffic so they can go back and forth. So now we have that intuitive dashboard reporting. That's kind of the fundamentals of how the bookmarking works on the actions, and you can add all different views to this. You can, what you want to do is maintain consistency with your bookmarking across all of your different buttons, but you also want to make sure that you're paying attention to how it's actually filtering your data, because these bookmarks can actually change how your data is being shown. There's all kinds of stuff on that online to understand what those filters and functions are and exactly how to do that. So the last thing I wanted to show you is sort of what it would look like if it was published. I took the liberty of adding some data in here and creating, our hidden buttons here, creating our navigation. I've made some changes to the reporting field and the titles to give you a better idea of after you get everything set up the way you want it and you start putting in your reporting and your visualizations and you have your data ready to go. Once you're ready and you publish it by doing your on publish here, you can see it from Power BI. So this is, I changed it, like I said, I added some data here. It's actually Google e-commerce data. This is data from the demo account of Google Analytics that they've given access to everybody through. So there's a few different reports I've pulled, a couple of different really cool visualizations that I like to do for some of the larger projects I have, just to give them a little flash. But this is just data from the Google Merchandise Store that I've put in here. And again, like I said, we have our navigation here. These are visualizations that you can access from the store. One of them is called the Play Axis visualization, and it allows you to actually play through and scroll through certain elements of a table you have here. And this is the simple image visual over the top of that axis visual. So what I've done is I've actually, on this guy, it's just a list of URLs that are the item images from the Google Merchandise Store. And the play axis is just scrolling through those different elements that I have. And you can see it's just going through all of those. It's cool to show, for instance, like if you have a sale event, showing those sale items, product images. If you work in HR, you can show people's faces. If you want to show previews of the reports that are actually in your report, which I've seen happen before and I've done once, you can start scrolling through those images too. You just have to have the URL or the storage space for them. But as you can see, I've hidden the main tabs here. All of our information works the same way. So I've moved the date down here into our reporting space, and I've added sort of like a home button here because that's more intuitive for me. I've changed some formatting here, but as you can see, you go through these guys. When you publish, what's going to happen is all these are going to disappear. You're not going to see any of those things in the actual report itself. And it's really, really a lot cleaner of an experience to have that come through than anything else. And I can pull that up for you right now. We'll bring that up, and I can show you how it works from the aspect of the online Power BI. And again, you'll be publishing it to a specific workspace. If you want to add it into an app, you absolutely can. If you want to bring it into any other workspace, you can build it in there. So here's what I'm showing you. So this is what it looks like once you publish it to Power BI Online. If you have Online Premium, you can publish it and anybody can see it as long as you give them access to it. If you don't have Premium and you just have Pro, they can interact with it either way. But they don't have to control click on it. As you can see, like I told you, there's only one title slide down here. to give them that ability of not understanding they're actually going through multiple pages. So if you click on traffic, it's going to show us the traffic. If you click on revenue, it's going to give us stats that you've built on revenue. A unit report, the FAQ section or the help section, and that's basically it. That's the whole crux of the navigation, is just to build on the bookmarking function. You can actually use the bookmarking function to incorporate switches. So in case you see data like the traffic data here, and you want to have mobile versus desktop, you can actually use the bookmarking function to have two different variants of this page data being shown. If they click on one, it shows them mobile. Click on the other, it shows them desktop. You use slicer functions in conjunction with those. But that's basically the nuts and bolts of it. I hope it was not too fast going through some of that stuff. I hope it was informative. I hope I didn't bore you to death with all the preface of understanding business needs before and assessing the need before you get to this point. But it'll pay off. Trust me, it'll be worth it to go through all that. And I am excited to see what comes out of that. Feel free to share some samples of some cool things that you've done with your Power BI dashboarding and the bookmarking function and intuitive dashboarding that you've built. You can catch up on Slack at the Analytics Nexus Slack channel. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dave, for sharing this material. It has been truly an enlightening presentation full of rich information. Just a reminder to our guests, you can engage with David Gatdula with questions or comments at his Slack channel on Analytics Nexus Slack. His information is also on this slide. Thanks again.